say this morning when I first spoke that who knew what I was going to say now, and until 30 seconds ago I wasn't entirely sure, but it seems to me that if we're going to eradicate sexual abuse and promote healthy relationships, we have to talk about culture. We've talked a lot about interventions, we've talked a lot about what we're going to do, but we have to also talk about the context in which we're going to do that. And I just not to forget that. That means talking about it at dinner parties, that means talking about it in our real lives as well as in our working lives, and you know, Internet Matters is a classic example. You know, I'd be very interested to know how many parents I know in my real life will know about it, and I will make sure they do moving forward. We have to talk about partnerships. When we talked about the Hedgehogs programme, which looked absolutely brilliant, I closed my eyes for a moment and thought, in Brook we do some similar content. In the charity which does homophobic bullying, which I'm connected to, there's some similar content. There are 24,000 schools. We don't need to be overlapping. We need to be making sure that there are enough common elements across the piece to really make sure that every child is getting the input and not some children are getting it 3 times. And how we do that will require us to work across organisations. We have to be gendered. It came through in several presentations, but a real understanding of gender and gender identity. And I think that there is a real challenge for us when it comes to boys and young men, that we bully them up and rough them up, and then we blame them when they behave in the ways which we have taught them to behave. And we don't provide sex education, and then we blame them when they look for porn on the internet. And we've got to square that circle and really think about gendered analysis. This stuff gets heavy, doesn't it, at times? You can get really worst case scenario. But how do we keep positive? And how do we ensure that we have a positive frame in order that we recognise that most children, young people will be okay, and that we must ensure that we've got the right resource, the right attention, the right energy for those who need it and be acutely aware of abuse. Again, we cannot be knee-jerk. And we see knee-jerk so many times, and we've got to take the long view on this to really get going. I have a question about evidence. What is it that we are looking to prove that we can do? And I think we have to prove that our programmes are effective, but we also have to know that there are certain qualities of good teaching and learning, there are qualities of good prevention, there are moral responsibilities we have to make sure that happens, and sometimes I wonder what it is exactly that we're looking for when we talk about evidence. And I don't underestimate the importance of it, but how do we make sure that we're really clear what we need to do now? And then finally, 2 things. One, which I think everybody would agree with, we've got to have high expectations for children and young people, so they have high expectations for themselves. I returned to language. I talked about language this morning, and I will possibly have some tomatoes thrown at me, but I challenge us not to talk about this being difficult and sensitive, but to talk about it as being important and vital. And if we talk about it as being important and vital, we've got much more chance of people coming along with us. And it feels as though that's something which we may just need to reflect on in all of our practices. So I end again on culture. We've got to have a culture that's positive about children and young people, a culture that's positive about sexuality, a culture that's clear that abuse is always wrong no matter who you are or where you are or what the medium is, and a culture of collaboration across sectors. Thank you.